The topic is the evolution of affirmative action, and we're talking to Ms. Walker and Dr. Sanford. Dr. Sanford, let's have you over the last few minutes that we have during this final segment to talk about where you see affirmative action in terms of American society today.
Well, thanks so much for the very important question. We are certainly at a crossroads with affirmative action. However, without any argument, there is still a strong need for this policy. We are when I say this crossroads, I mean that when you think in terms of how people are moving into placing people in very uncomfortable, hostile environments because of their misconceived notions about affirmative action to the point of a backlash. Many are talking in terms of there being reverse discrimination. Dr. Alan Johnson, in his book entitled Privilege, Power, and Difference, talks about if there's one particular position, 500 people trying to apply for it who are indeed qualified for it, and if there's one European American person that gets that position, say in a high-tech type of a situation, then everybody feels like, well, it's a qualified person, then it must be okay. But if an African American or a female gets that position, then you got 499 people feeling that they are reverse discriminated against. And I think when we move on, we'll see how affirmative action is indeed a process that leads us into having a better working environment. The American Association of Higher Education, the American Council of Education, looks at this process as actually benefiting the majority group in much more of a powerful way than even the minority group at institutions of higher learning as well as in the workforce. As you know, in 2003, the Supreme Court had to make a decision, as did with Brown, as did with Presley, as did with the Dred Scott case, about affirmative action. And we were with a slim margin of having support for it. So there is still a need for it. This whole notion of a compassionate, conservative type of society is not bridging the gap between the racist, discriminatory, and sexist type and homophobic type of environment in which we still live in today. So there is still needed there to try to give people certain types of opportunities and fairness.
Very good. You know, Ms. Walker, I think you mentioned earlier about the distinction between diversity and affirmative action. Let's have you to speak to that.
Right. Affirmative action is actually the process to get to equal employment and diversity. A lot of people want to talk about diversity, but they shun affirmative action. Well, you can't get to diversity without having affirmative action, this fair and open process that brings in qualified people. You just don't get there because people tend to do the same thing that they've always done. So if you don't have a program that requires people to do extensive outreach, to advertise in the right places, to have a fair job description, to bring people in and not to have harassment and discrimination in the workplace, then you can't have diversity. All you have is a revolving door. People coming in and people going out and filing cases of discrimination because they're not treated well in the work environment. So we have to understand that even with affirmative action, we don't get the kind of diversity that we should be getting at this time because people are still dealing with nepotism, bringing people, friends, families. I speak about the extensive form of nepotism and also putting people in place because it looks good to the community. That is putting African Americans or Native Americans or whoever in place who are not qualified. I think the most egregious